Now that we have the body roughed out, let's go ahead and move on to the mouth. Now we're just going to create a basic mouth. We're not going to add a lot of detail, but we're just going to create the mouth and the mouth cavity. So let's start by selecting our object. Now if you want, we can see how it's smoothed, and that's working pretty good, but I'm actually going to do this in regular polygon mode. So I'm going to make sure I hit the 1 key on my keyboard, and we're going to go into the front view. So here is the mouth of the character. So I'm going to start off by creating some detail on these two faces. So I'm going to go into face mode, and I'm going to select this face and this face, and you can see which ones I have selected here. And then we're going to extrude that to create the additional detail. So I'm going to go into Edit Mesh, and we're going to go Extrude Faces. And then I'm going to scale this extrusion down. I'm not going to pull it in or out. I'm just going to scale it. Because what we want is we want this to be on the surface that we're working with. And you can see that right here, we're already getting a little bit of a problem here in that it's going in. As we scale it, it's starting to shrink down. But let's go ahead and take a look at this from the front view. And let's just get this about this shape, and I'm going to go ahead and move this up. So something about like this. We can always reshape this later, but I want to make sure I get it pretty close. Now the other thing is that we don't want this indent, because that's really going to make him look like he's got kind of puckered lips. We want this to be flat to the character. So I'm going to move this out so it's reasonably flat. And you can see here when I do that, what it's doing is it's actually creating a little bit of extra detail here, but we'll take care of that in just a little bit. So you can see how when I pull it out, it's giving this convex. So we went kind of from concave to convex. But now that I have this pretty much in shape, I'm going to go ahead and add just a few divisions. I'm going to add 3 divisions just to give it enough detail so that it can animate, and then tweak it just a little bit more. And that should be it. So I'm going to go ahead and click off of this. So now I've got a lot of detail here, a lot of radial detail for the mouth. I added that additional detail to make animation a little bit easier. But one of the problems, like I showed you, is that this is kind of sticking out this way. So we need to push all of this detail back. So I'm going to right click over this, go into vertex mode, and I will also want to turn on symmetry along the x-axis, so that way we can just move one side and have the other follow along. So I'm going to go ahead into this top view here, and you can see that I've got these little rings of detail, and so when I select them here, they move in, and then just move those so that they're flat to the detail above and below them. So I'm going to go ahead and select these, and again I'm just moving these along the z-axis, so I'm just kind of pushing them back. So I want to make sure that this is fairly flat so that when I start adding detail that I don't get additional bumps and wiggles in the surface of the character. So I just want to make sure that that's fairly flat. So now that looks pretty good. So now that I have this, I've got basically an outline for a mouth, but let's go ahead and make the mouth cavity. I'm going to right click over this, go back into face mode, I'm going to select these inner faces. And I've got my symmetrical select on, so I'm going to go ahead and double click on that and turn symmetry off again because we don't need it. And then just make sure I have both of these selected. And then we're going to do another extrude. So I'm going to go into Edit Mesh, Extrude Faces, and this time I'm just going to go ahead and push that back. In fact, I can just hit the W key here. And the first thing I want is I want just a little bit of an inset. I don't want a whole lot of extrusion, because what I want is I want just enough detail to get the inside of the lip of the character. And then I'm going to do one more. And this time, this is going to be for the mouth cavity. You can see this a little bit better if we turn on X-ray. And I'm going to hide my reference. So you can see I've got this additional detail in here, and I can select it from the front. And so now I just want to make this into kind of just a generic mouth cavity. So I'm going to scale this flat, and then scale it up a little bit. I'm going to scale it vertically and a little bit horizontally, so that way the mouth cavity kind of goes in and has a little bit more of a cavity. And then I can do one more extrude. And then I can also scale that extrusion. So now I've got the basis of a mouth cavity. I don't really need the full detail here, but I've got at least the start of something. Let's go ahead and turn off X-ray. And you can see that now I've got a basic mouth cavity. And if I smooth that by hitting 3, you can see that I've got a pretty good mouth cavity. But you notice here we're getting a lot of bulging. And that's because we don't have a lot of detail around the mouth just yet. But we're going to go ahead and add more as we start to add the eyes and additional detail. So right now this is good to start. And so now that we have this basic mouth cavity, we can move on to other parts of the character.